This is about right. I want it just near me so that everybody can hear me. My assistant Robert, who works at Barron's, is going to be changing slides when I ask him to. I have never done a presentation without PowerPoint slides. I think that they explain a lot. I am not as articulate as I should be, and for you to see visuals, I think helps a great deal. I'm going to be talking about this subject that's up there on the screen, the causes of the meltdown, of the market failure or government failure. I know Vic likes a lot of interaction with the audience. I'm wondering this. I'm going to be going probably way too long. I've got literally 49 displays, probably more detail than we can pack into a whole evening. But in the middle, I'm going to stop pretty much after I've polished off the Federal Reserve, re-expense equivocations, improvements of equivocations, Bernanke's equivocations about what happened, and then we'll stop for 10 minutes, 15 minutes of questions, and then we'll talk a lot about the government-sponsored enterprises, Fannie and Freddie. The title of this talk could be called Fannie, Freddie, and the Fed. But also, I'm going to surprise you a bit by speaking for a while about my credo. Robert, would you change slides? I'll just say next. Now, I'm calling those 7 IFACs, infrequently asked questions, which establish my credo. Every single one of these questions and answers could be a speech in itself. Next, Robert. Now that, I admit, is not an infrequently asked question, but the answer I'm giving is somewhat different from the usual one. Economics is a series of relatively simple but indispensable insights about prices, wages, interest rates, credit, money, investment, and entrepreneurship that rarely get imparted in college courses on economics. I left a word out of there. I should have called it a series of qualitative insights. They're all qualitative, because while they have different numerical manifestations in history, the supply and demand for wheat, the supply and demand for video recorders, all of that changes over time, especially as in the example of video recorders, the product itself is no longer what you buy. You buy DVDs. So these are qualitative insights about economics. And why is it that it's not important in the colleges? Next. What's wrong with mainstream economics? 2 things. The mainstream economists are enthralled to power. The exemplar of that, of course, from the 20th century is John Maynard Keynes. He was clearly in love with running the world. When he wrote the introduction to the general theory on interest and employment in the German edition, to appeal to Adolf Hitler's government, he specifically said that what he put forward in that book lent itself best to totalitarianism, and that is the word he used in English. It was a word at the time. He thought that totalitarianism especially fit his system that put forward in the general theory. A few months later, he talked about how enamored he was of the Soviet Union because he had amazingly discovered, that the proletariat really wasn't running the country. That's what he had against Marxism. What he had against Marxism was that it would be too much bottom-up control. Once he realized that professionals like him ran the country, then he was infatuated with the Soviet Union. I mean, that was essentially the nature of John Maynard Keynes and the kind of economics he formulated, which, of course, got very exciting for a lot of economists. The trajectory of Alan Greenspan's career is very much in line with that. A guy who wrote at age 40 a pretty good essay called Golden Economic Freedom, a rebel against the government. By age 48, he was chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors under Gerald Ford, and then, of course, he became master of the universe. How exciting if you're the nerd in the 7th grade who everybody cheats off, and then you can go out with Barbara Walters. You'll sacrifice your integrity anytime for that kind of excitement. That's what mars economics very severely. Now, the other part of it is if that weren't bad enough, it pretends to be a branch of physics, because that way you can sound esoteric. And there are so many formulations in economics that are just off on cloud nine because they lend themselves so well to statements in mathematics. Next. On a related point, why must a classic liberal be a capitalist? Because capitalism is essential to a free society. I probably needn't explain that. It's necessary to a free society, although I hasten to add it's not sufficient. But you can't have freedom without capitalism. Next. Why must a bleeding heart liberal be a capitalist as well? Because the capitalism is essential to lifting the living standards of the broad masses of people. That's a more subtle point. The great fortunes were always made in selling to the masses. It's not really the privileged elites who benefit from capitalism. It's mainly the masses who do. That's why I occasionally call myself a bleeding heart capitalist. Because what capitalism really is what lifts the masses out of poverty. The elites can more or less cope in a social society. It's only under capitalism that the ordinary person has a chance. Next slide. What kind of economic system do we have? A system of crapitalism, as I call it, contraction of crony capitalism. I got the phrase from my socialist Uncle Abe. He didn't realize how right he was, in which, now this is a bit of a mouthful, maybe I could clean it up a little bit and make it more cogent, in which the potential for real capitalism to lift living standards and enhance freedom is constrained by the unholy alliance of big business and government, and secondarily, the government bureaucracy, examples of agribusiness and the farm lobby, Wall Street, Washington. I've been talking to a few people about an article that appeared in the New Yorker a week ago about the Koch brothers and the organizations they finance. And of course, for the New Yorker writer, it was taken for granted that the Koch brothers finance pro-business organizations. The strange inability to see the difference between what is pro-business or pro-corporate and pro-free market. All this researcher had to do was open up a recent study from Mercatus, which is an organization she mentions as being pro-business, or Cato. In the case of Mercatus, I cited and wrote up a very good essay about the meltdown, which, of course, the author speaks specifically about the unholy alliance between Wall Street and Washington. If that man and if that study is a friend of business, then they don't need enemies. Business that caters and panders to power and uses government to enhance its power is clearly a major target of Cato and Mercatus and others, including me, and I hope you as well. So unfortunately, we have a capitalist system, but I hasten to add, we do have a system in which there are indeed always powerful forces of entrepreneurship trying to spread good to the masses. There's always a race between the range of choice. We are free to choose in this society, and capitalism is always enhancing that range of choice, and many of us are conscious of it via the internet, the empowerment that it gives us, the choices that it gives us over the internet to choose what we want to do. All that has enhanced our freedom at the same time that government is encroaching on our freedom, and so it's a subtle sort of race between the one system and the other in the system that we do have. Next, please. What are the two main differences between free market economists of the Chicago school and those of the Austrian school? Now, these two that I list are very much to the point of my discussion tonight. Austrians have a well-developed theory of the causes of business cycles. Chicagoans have various explanations of different times. As a matter of fact, last session, we were talking about Milton Friedman, who was, I think, a great man, a man I personally revered. I had the pleasure of calling him up frequently and chatting with him, and I very much admired him. But his brand of economics was different. And he, in fact, once told me that he thought that he had disproved the truth of Austrian economics, Austrian business cycles, because he said he'd done empirical work in which he tried to show that that a bust and a boom were not always symmetrical. In other words, he literally told me, I can quote him almost verbatim, he said, wouldn't you assume that if the Austrian business cycle is valid, that the strength of a boom has